And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Social. I got to say, still feeling pretty good from yesterday. Yesterday's episodes were a lot of fun to record, not just the raw episode that we recorded in the morning or the Patreon group after, but the episode that we recorded with Amanda and Jackie. After that, that was a blast. Anybody who's wondering, you'll be able to see that episode when it comes out in a few weeks. You're also going to be able to see the episode with, well, not just the episode, but the series with Jackie and Amanda that's going to be coming out in the very near future. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But aside from that, we're just warming up right now. We are getting ready for our 25th roundtable episode. It will be happening at 6 p.m. Eastern time today. You can still become a part of that roundtable episode if you would like to. Just go to Dualistic Unity. No, what am I saying? Well, you could go to dualistiCunity.com and definitely do that if you're interested in what we're talking about. But patreon.com/dualistic unity. Tier 2 and Tier 3 supporters can participate in our roundtable episodes every 2 weeks. You can be a part of the conversation. You don't have to know what we're talking about. You can introduce something new and we'll all adapt to you. It always makes a good episode, but it's a great way to connect with the community, to talk about the things that you're going through in your life. And it becomes an episode for the rest of the community to listen to later on. So you're contributing, you're making a ripple. Not that you're not always making a ripple. You are, in fact, always making a ripple, but you get to do so on the screen with us, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, those episodes are always a blast, and it's really fun to be able to just hear different perspectives from people. And I mean, we hear that in our Patreon groups all the time, people going through similar types of things, and on the roundtable, it's just cool to be able to do that in more of a public setting. But it's funny when people are going through certain things and just how often there's resonance on those Patreon groups, because we'll have 10, 20, 30 people on, and like a lot of people will share very, very similar insights, similar things, similar types of situations that they're going through. And how often there's been times in my life where I felt like I was the only person going through certain things, like the only person that has ever gone through the types of things that I've been through, the situations that I'm in. And we so often forget how similar, although they're translated differently, share through different experiences, like how similar the feelings that we go through are, the feelings of, self-doubt to joy to happiness to fucking anger and distress and all of those things. And so it's cool to be able to connect and just chat about whatever is going on, whatever the hell we want to talk about. I was talking with a friend earlier today about podcasting. She does a lot of interviewing and is trying to get more into different types of interviews. And we were talking just about podcasting, and I kind of brought up how our podcast is a little different. Like it's not this rigidly structured sort of thing at all. And I didn't even realize necessarily how big of a component of Dualistic Unity that was, like the willingness to get on to an episode like this, or a raw episode, or even our regular classic episodes with a guest, and have little to zero idea of where we want it to go, how we want it to go, because we're not trying to control it to go in a certain way. And we're not going into it thinking like that we could possibly know what's best. And so you can't prepare for something in the same way if you really, really understand that you can't know what's best, and any idea that you think is going to be best will likely only get in the way of whatever could be expressed if you were actually there for it. And so she was just asking how often we film episodes, and I'm like, well, pretty often, because it is just that conversation. And that's the beauty, because people, there'll be people who will do one episode a week, but they'll spend like hours and hours and hours, like tens of 20s of hours, researching their guests. And I'm not saying that that's, better or worse necessarily. It's just an entirely different type of thing. Whereas what we're doing, not that we're necessarily trying to do anything, but a big part of Dualistic Unity is the willingness to just show up as yourself and just show up with yourself. And I like, another thing I've been realizing recently is like I can just show up to things. Like I can just show up, and whatever hits me, whatever I want to talk about, I talk about, whatever, however something's going is how it's going. And for so much of my life, I've had this at least always some idea of, oh, I gotta at least keep this in mind or that in mind, want to bring this up, want to, remember this about this person or think about this going into a situation or a conversation or an interaction or anything. There's been some degree of preparation, which is just a mechanism of trying to control it. Like anything is a way of trying to control how you're perceived, which is impossible, or control how something's going to go, which is also impossible. Like continuing to spend time trying to control certain situations, despite there being absolutely no way for you to guarantee that preparing is any better than like not preparing at all. And sure, there's certain situations. I'm not saying like never prepare for anything ever whatsoever, always show up like, oh, I don't know. Like imagine for a retreat if we just like showed up with everyone else as equally as uncertain with no idea of anything going on, which is like, not super far from what we do, but at least we have our bearings with the situation and, obviously know the house beforehand and all that stuff. But how lost of a, I don't know, mentality or willingness that is to just jump into something without so much prep or so much desire to control how it's going to go based on an assumption, just an assumption that you're making to actually distract yourself from being fully, wholeheartedly, and entirely in the situation that you're in.
You know, it's interesting because right now we have a backlog of quite a few episodes that are to come out over the next few weeks. And I was listening to one of them over again today, which will be coming out this afternoon for anybody who's wondering. Episode 14, it's going to be awesome. It's called Letting Go of the Question. We go on at length in that episode, towards the end especially, about how conditioned we really are to judge ourselves, to really put ourselves in there and be analyzing our progress and measuring ourselves up. And not just that we're conditioned to do it, but that the mechanism that is conditioning us is also the product of that conditioning. So it's very much like a chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? Like we're just conditioning ourselves to condition ourselves to condition ourselves to condition ourselves. And it's really just conditioning ourselves. And again, in the name of what's best for you, in the name of good intentions. Like obviously you're going to be better off if you know how to do all of these things like all these other kids do. Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you're give me an example, like again, my daughter's homeschooled. We went into this before, and she has various different ideas about what she wants to do as she gets older. And as such, I've always told her that, well, what you're interested in is what you should focus on. And as somebody who is homeschooled and in a high school environment that is self-designed, where she gets to pursue different avenues that she is the most interested in, she is able to focus on things without necessarily being beaten down and judged for doing badly in courses that she has no goddamn interest in. None. And isn't that nice? Because how many times there's like, well, no, you gotta get these credits. You gotta have a well-rounded out curriculum. You gotta do all this stuff. It's like, but I'm never gonna do this stuff. I have no interest in this stuff. I hate doing this stuff. I have like, and it's just like it doesn't matter because you are like every other student. And what's worse, and we talked about this in the episode as well, is there's this assumption that just because we're in the same grade, that we are at the same developmental stage. And again, as a child, especially, where each and every month of your life is a new month in your existence as a whole. A 6-month gap between you and another kid in your class is substantial. It makes a difference, right? And it's just that we don't think about any of these things because we want to oversimplify the answer. We want to oversimplify control. We want to oversimplify the schooling system so we know that kids will get the education they need and get out into the world and serve the purpose that they're supposed to serve. And we can continue on our steady march towards progress, whatever that might be. And so we're all working real hard, learning how to do shit that none of us enjoy for the sake of finding a couple of hours where we can enjoy ourselves after we've spent a lifetime forgetting how.
Oh man, the way that school absolutely fucks a kid's desire to learn and like dig in and be enthusiastic is insane. And of course, there's a balance as an adult between, recognizing that and putting all the responsibility on the school system, on the system itself. It's like, no, I can't learn because school fucked me up. It's like, you can now though, now that you understand what the mechanism that they did was and how ridiculous it was, maybe you can look at that and maybe let go of that. And, without them, you're still able to right now do all the things that you maybe wouldn't have been so averse to naturally. But once you're willing to see that, then it allows it to change. But oh man, that like your daughter's ability to dig into things that she's interested in, enthusiastic about, like just not getting drilled by things that you don't want to learn. Like just that experience in and of itself is so incredible because that was like I experienced a good basically the entire time I was at school. Like you're lucky if there's one subject that you enjoy. Like, oh, I have one class to look forward to. For me, it was like gym, recess, and math like every other year. There were certain things like advanced calc sucked. Even any calculus just sucked, but all the arithmetic stuff early on, I enjoyed that. And certain um like psychological actually I had to take theology in high school because I went to a Catholic high school, and theology and morality, that was the one that I actually enjoyed because it was a lot of like debate type stuff and discussion based things, and there weren't right answers. It was much more, let's talk about this, what do we think about this? And that was like, I remember that one actually. Now that I'm thinking of it, that was my junior year of high school. That was like a breath of fresh air throughout the day, was being able to go to that class, and like the novelty and looking forward to a class in high school is like one, yeah, it was like I think maybe one class every other year. There was a class that I actually enjoyed and look forward to. And so with all of those things, like the fact that that exists, that there's something that we have to spend all this time doing that we're then graded upon. It's not even like we're doing something enthusiastic we're about, and then our performance is getting looked at, which would probably suck a lot of the fun out of it as well. Anytime you're measured or judged, but like the constant measurement week to week to week to week to week to week, like, oh my God, thinking about it now, like I forget how much school was like, all right, we got to test. It's like a test once a month. And then it's just basic, like, all right, we got a lesson. It's a 3-week lesson plan. Week by week, we're going to learn this. We're going to learn this today. We're going to learn this tomorrow. You have homework on this, homework on that, homework on this, homework on that. And I've mentioned this school a few times, but it was a school 5th through 9th grade, hardcore Catholic school, gave just a fuckload of homework. Like they just didn't want you doing anything else. And I remember my freshman year, because I ended up leaving that school after that year, but because I just hated everything so much that I was learning, I would just sit at my desk. Like, I would just sit there, like, after school, like, or at my table at home or whatever I was sitting on doing homework. I would just sit there and, like, just and this was, like, just peak procrastination, but it was just the enthusiasm and enjoyment knowing that every class they gave homework in every single class, like, 7 classes, and it was like I always wondered, do teachers know that there's other classes that I'm taking? Because sometimes it would be like 2 hours in this class, 45 minutes in this class, hour in this class. And it's like, I don't have enough fucking time in the day to do this shit in this way. Because it would be like 7 hours of school and then 4 hours of homework and like 3 hours of sports. And it's like, holy shit. But that's like pretty normal for a lot of kids to have all of those things. And I know you going through it had even more shit because you had work on top of it too. And then you were forced to learn all this bullshit. Like, holy fucking Christ, the way that just sucks every joy out of the learning and enthusiasm process is unbelievable. It's like it was made for it.
It's kind of funny, but it wasn't. It's so funny because we get caught up in the idea like it's the result of some nefarious plot. And it's like, no, it's just the result of expediency. It's really what it is cutting corners for the sake of getting what you want a little bit faster. And in a lot of cases, like give you an example, like a lot of the schooling that I got was about Canadian history. And you would have learned about American history, but pretty much fuck all about the rest of the world. You would have learned almost nothing about the rest of the world, but you would have learned about how awesome your country is and how awesome its history was and how awesome it continues to be and how awesome you are as part of it, which is the same shit that I got and the same shit that every other kid gets in that school. And that is largely because that is how you keep a country going. But it is also because the people who wrote those books think the same fucking way in terms of identifying with their country. And so they're just passing on conditioning that was passed on to them, which was passed on to them. Even the idea of having a country is some degree of conditioning. It comes back from what we've done for thousands of years in terms of conquest and nation building and all this other crap, right? Like all of it's just conditioned response. All of it's just, well, that's what we've done before. Therefore, that's what we have to always do. It's all it is. And we're not aware of it for the most part. We talked about it before, but the fact that, our the way that we keep time goes back like 6,000 years because they used a base 60 calculator or base 60 form of math. It wasn't base 10, it was base 60. So all of our minutes and all of our hours are based on a Sumerian form of mathematics. None of us know that. We just use it. We just use it because we've always used it. And that's really just it. But there's so much of what we do that is like that. And that includes identifying with nationalism. It includes, having a bias and promoting a bias towards the group that you identify with and the borders that you look at as what provides your safety. Right. Like there's so much that goes into this, but we don't look at it like that. We tend to oversimplify it.
Yeah, and it's like there's this baseline sort of assumption of things. Like, I feel like a lot of people I know have varying degrees of assumption about how things are. Like, the phrase "it is what it is" or "oh, that's just how it is." Yeah, that one. That's just the way it is. That is a happens in scales, I think. And so, for example, someone could say, like, that's just the way it is about something more recent, like a way a government is run. I guess that could be part of it, is like the scale is based upon how willing someone is to dig into the roots of things almost. Like, the US having a very, very divided two-party system. Like, it's getting more and more progressively divided. So someone, if I were to bring up, say, "Oh, it's very divided," and someone was like, "Oh, that's just how it is." It's like, that's a really surface level, just the way it is, because it's so recent. But then something like, me saying that countries are silly, that's like a deeper, well, that's just the way it is. Like, a lot of less people are willing to question that versus the two-party disparity, but it's still like you take that far enough and you end up at what our conversations kind of revolve around. A lot of times it's just, what spot are you done questioning? Like, what spot, I guess, makes you too uncomfortable to keep questioning? Like, is it, and it goes for reality, society, you know, geography, history, and identity. Very much so, identity. And so, at what point are you willing to question it? And I guess with identity, even, it can be like a day-to-day thing. Like, "Oh, I'm this type of person because of this." And it's like, "Yeah, but you don't know that." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, you're right." And so that is, it kind of lets go of it, but then there's deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper things. So I think it goes for both society, like all different facets. There's kind of this scale of assumption versus willingness to question things. And so it's interesting. Um, yeah, I forget why I started talking about that. But anyway, it's just an interesting disparity to see, because there's certain people I'll talk to and they're willing to dig in pretty deep, but then there's certain things that they just don't want to question. And I get it. Like there's a lot of things that I am probably still unwilling, very much so, to question, and maybe I don't even realize it, or just things that are far more uncomfortable to question too, and look at and realize. But it's all things, whether we know it or not, like there's the illusion of it giving us some sort of, I don't know what the word is, like comfort, freedom, something like that, despite it still being a weight, despite it's like the illusion of being okay with it, when in reality, it's uncomfortable maybe at first to question it, but that allows for more freedom, the more willing you are to realize, oh, that's not certain either. Oh, I can't be sure of that either. Oh, I can look at that. Cause then that opens up the door to looking at it and then maybe starting to question. I think that's maybe where I started out, was like just opening the door up to certain conversations. Cause that then questions at least the more surface level things people are focusing on about it. And it's like, with countries, for example, someone talking about like the wars and stuff going on. But then if you're willing to look at like the division that's perpetuating the assumptions about I'm right, you're wrong, then that's an entirely different conversation. And then it's not so much about who's right or who's wrong, because every time there's some shit going on, both sides have pretty good reasons to be doing it if they're holding on to the truth that this is what I am. But once that's questioned, it's a lot harder to hold on to those types of truths.
And that right there is why we don't tend to get involved when people are asking us about a war between one side or another. Like, why don't you speak about this? It's because it's the same unfortunate consequence on both sides, and people are caught in the middle because, as with everything, there is an ebb and flow to how committed to that mentality of division and that idea of control and that idea of getting what's right for you and security and all that stuff that person is. I mean, the people who are most committed to that are typically the people in government, right? Or the people in the military or the people in the police, right? And those are the people that are out there enacting government decrees based on fear, based on identity, based on this need to keep control. And those are the people who are clashing on both sides. And the people who believe less in that shit are caught in the middle because their lives are governed by the structure that is built around them based on this illusion of control. It's really interesting because, we talk about this stuff, and it really just comes down to the fact that we don't think about the world that we live in and how it got here. We just think about how to live in it. We just think about how to adapt to the system as it is. We forget we made it. We put the system there. Before there was a system, there was just a bunch of people. Before there was a system, there was just a bunch of people with differing ideas about how to live. That's it. And then we became, I guess, engrossed or enamored with this idea that there was a right way to live and that everybody must agree with us. And that is unfortunately just the biggest problem that we have. This is why we feel like we should police the world and spread democracy and do all that rather than just allow people to maybe come up with something better. Because you ever notice, like, we only ever want to spread democracy on like a nationwide level, right? We don't want to actually empower small communities to have their own little democracies. And then, we just want to make big nations that empower other big nations. And then they get together in a big group and they form themselves as a zone, which is ultimately just another nation, right? With more politicians. That's pretty much it. And it's just because we don't want to have faith in one another. We don't want to redesign everything from the ground up and go back to where we started as a bunch of people just walking around the earth trying to live. But we could absolutely do that. We could go back, and this is why I love the birth of AI. We have the technology to actually feed this information into something and go, hey, how would you go about governing, or how would you go about making sure that there is a system of small communities that all communicate with one another, that resources are shared, and that there is no opportunity for any one person or organization within this to gain power in a way that reflects inequality. Just let the AI come up with it. Come up with a bunch of ideas and start pitching them at one another. But the problem. You know exactly what the problem would be. The powers that be, right? Those that are profiting, those that are afraid to let go of what they know. That's all the problem is those who are afraid to let go. This is what I know, and I'm doing quite well. It's like, yeah, you're doing quite well. Have you noticed all the other people who are not? Like the fact that there is a 1% that people talk about and we know about, that's a thing that people should be looking at, right? Just that, while there are so many people who don't have, right, or can't get, or are scraping by on a planet that has more than enough. But the problem is that individually we don't have more than enough, right? Individually we don't have enough. Always need more because we're proving ourselves. We're trying to be something. We want to be something, and that requires us to achieve things and have things and be able to show people shit that we have. And if we let all of that go, you'd be surprised how big of a hit the economy would take. Black Friday would be like, meh. That would be really funny. People just stay home. Maybe somebody goes out and buys a cheap TV because it's a good sale. But I mean, for the rest of it, it's like I'm not going out to buy a bunch of shit I don't need. Just something I need. That'd be great.
Oh yeah, every time my last few moves, I've every time used it as an opportunity to get rid of more and more shit. And like for any time like a birthday or anything comes around, I'm like, I don't I'm actively trying to get rid of things. Like, do not want more shit. And yeah, fuck, what was the last thing with eating more, having more? Oh, it meaning something about you, and then the that idea that having more shit means something about you. Like, if I have more, I am more. Because I've had plenty of conversations with people about, you know, look around. There's a bunch of crazy shit going on, and the argument, it's very much brushed off, just like that's kind of how the world is. It's a component of the way things are. Like there's always going to be some degree of homelessness or poverty in a nation, and and that right there, that's one of those assumptions that someone's not willing to question. It's like, does it? Does it always have to be like that? Like, do we know that? Do we actually know that? Have we tried? Have we thought maybe it could be possible? And of course, as soon as you start asking those questions, it's like, well, then they start looking at their life and it's like, well, then I would have to maybe think about my own life differently. But then start asking the question is like, well, shit, how would my life change? I have a lot of stuff. Do I need all this stuff? Is there a benefit to having so much stuff and thinking that it means something about me, or is it just weighing me down? Would I feel a little bit less weighed down if I didn't have so much stuff and could actually, you know, use some of the money to help other people, other iterations of me, or even just getting rid of things requires less space, taking up less space. Therefore, there's more options out there. But it's like, oh man, it's changing day by day, and there's shifts one way or the other each and every day. But there is like a side of our society. It's like we've gone so far in the direction of control and like certainty and division, and how much like even something like social media, again, just a tool. All these all those things are just tools, but it's yeah, I guess every tool has an opportunity to be used one way or the other. Like this podcast wouldn't be a thing without social media, but a lot of times people use it in a way of, isolating themselves even more and thinking that they're connected without actually having that connection. But yeah, every time I bring up like the bigger things to most people, it's like they just don't want to look at it. Like they just don't. It's not even like they have a valid argument or a valid thought. It's just either that's just a component of society, or come on, let's talk about something else. I'm like, fuck. Oh God. But yeah, it's interesting.
It's
going
again,
with
it's a
that.
fear response, and I want to say this as a parent is that it's a natural part of the process of growing up. We just tend to forget that collectively we reflect part of a human developmental process in the same way that individually we do. Right? That's the whole thing. We forget that while there are adults in the room, not everybody is one of them. Right? And so a large portion of our society is more or less just chugging along, trying to survive without any real awareness of what the fuck that means. Like we really are. We're going through school because we're told, okay, you're here, go there. Now go there. Now go there. Now then you go there, and now you go there, and now you get these. And while you're doing this, you can get that along the way, and just keep doing that. And then, oh, now you're dead. But our whole life we're just going from one thing to the next. And what's funny is that when you start to talk to people about this, when you start to really get down to the fact that there are so many things that we just don't fucking think about, we just don't. They'll look at you and they'll actually start to say like, I feel like I've been living in a fog. And it's not that they've been living in a fog, they've just been living with the tunnel vision of what comes next. And that is tunnel vision. And for a child, that's very much life. What comes next? That's how we come into the world. What comes next? The complexity of that perception changes as we grow up. But when we're very young, it's very simple. What comes next? And that's why children are so impressionable. Right? Oddly enough, it's the reason ChatGPT isn't given a memory, which I find funny because it would then start to be far more complex. It would start to learn from previous decisions. It would start to learn. So as long as they keep it going just through what comes next, then it can never really acquire any kind of a personality or consciousness, right? It can never actually adapt in a free-flowing manner because it's always just going through what it's previously been programmed to know instead of learn on the fly. So I think that's kind of funny. But yeah, we just forget that. And we get really caught up thinking that all of society is thinking about where are we going? We forget that. Oh, give a good example. There are a large amount of people who are environmentalists. Very few of them spent much time in nature. Right. And it's just because they define themselves as people who are fighting a great evil. There is an egotistical payoff there, and they're not actually thinking about what it means. It's the same with veganism and vegetarianism. Some people are doing it for a damn good reason. Some people are doing it because how they're perceived. And we forget that. Like it's the same with politics. Some people are doing it for a good reason. Some people are doing it because of how they're perceived. And that's what we fail to really keep in mind is that there are some adults. There are a lot of children still playing childhood games or teenager games in a world where they look and sound like adults because we assume they are because of the size of their bodies.
Yeah, I feel like a lot, maybe at least most politicians go in for being politicians. Here and there, you get the few, and even the ones that it seems like, oh, they're really, really in it. It's still there's still some of that, but at the same time, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe at some point one of us will do gets big and one of us runs for some. And
No.
no, all right,
Just
fair.
no. It would be fun to just like I don't know, do something ridiculous. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Like run under the like just run a campaign telling people not to vote.
Yeah, that's kinda what I'm saying, something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah,
like
like
being
don't vote for
involved.
anyone. That's your vote. Abstain. I wonder how much of an impact you could have. Could you imagine if you actually actively made don't vote an indicator of people's faith in the system? It's like this coming election, if you don't have faith in this system on either party, don't vote. I would love to see how that turned out because there'd be such a huge like portion of society that would just not vote. If that was an option, it would be like if you vote that this system is fucked, we're going to start from the ground up. Could you imagine? That'd be awesome.
That would I'm down to give it a shot. I mean, we got in the US 2024, November 2024, we got a year. Hashtag don't vote. Get it trending.
Hashtag don't vote. That's right. Or yeah, that'd be great because it's a vote of non-confidence, in my opinion. If you're not willing to vote for the system, then it's because you don't believe in it.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's like record numbers, at least, and it's not to say certainly that like, you know, 20% of people don't vote and all of a sudden they're like, well, guess we gotta reset. It's like that's not necessarily gonna happen overnight, but it's still it causes a big ripple in the sense that people realize, oh, maybe they will take a second look, or oh, is this the best we could do? And at least start asking the question, at least start wondering. But the other thing with the complexity as we grow up and shifting away from like just the what's next and the focus on where we're at basically to being somewhere else. It's interesting how beautifully intelligent we are in the sense that we can just pay attention and things are still gonna be processed as if they're like, we're not paying attention, like, we're still processing so many fucking things even as we're fully immersed in the thing that we're doing, and if you're willing to do that, then those things will be there as you need them, like, the thoughts will be there if you're just paying attention, and if they're not, like, it is what it is, but how often I felt like I had to maintain ideas in my head. Like I have to keep this thought here or I have to get rid of this thought as opposed to it just being back there doing stuff, processing things and me continuing to be able to live my life cuz like that's what kids are doing and they're learning at rates so much faster. Like the in terms of learning rate, I'm sure kids are like 100 times faster at least depending on what how old you are. It's probably even higher, 1,000 times faster than adults just because there's no hesitation or thought of, "Oh, what is this gonna mean about me?" So you can just keep doing things and doing things and doing things and doing things, and it's gonna take a certain amount of time to learn something, but you're not gonna have the same sort of drag, and so, yeah, it's still gonna take a certain amount of time, sure, but it's like and it's not some supernatural acceleration, it's just that there's no deceleration. There's no drag as you're learning the thing, but if you're able to do that now with, the tools that you have now, there's so much more capabilities as an adult if adults were able to maintain that sort of childlike focus just on where they're at, but how much our perception of ourselves, how we see ourselves completely shifts and cuts down on our ability, if not takes away our ability to just focus on where we're at as opposed to where we've been or where we think we're going or where we think we should be going or where we're, afraid of going.
This is why I enjoy our podcast, and the reason I enjoy the community as it grows and whatnot is because we're all just sharing, we're all just talking, we're all just having a dialogue with one another about how much we limit ourselves and how much we can get out of the way and stop doing that. And so we get better and better at doing so. And then we go out and we challenge ourselves. See, that's the best thing about all of this is that we're not teaching you anything except that you can go learn stuff. If you just stop telling yourself you can't, or that you shouldn't, or that life is going to change too much if you don't. Like there's so much fear that we have, and the reason we hold on to the familiar is largely because of it, but we're not aware of that. Our brain's just like, hold on to the familiar because that's how you survive. And this is what makes you feel good is feeling safe. It's like, for how long though? There's this oversimplification of the process. And so the podcast, these conversations are really just about stringing it out, having discussions that we should have been having our entire lives with adults who were having them too, about what life is about from their own perspective, not just how to fit in, not just which team to cheer for, or which car to own, or which job to have, or any of that. Like there's so much more to this, and we don't talk about it. So you have deeper questions, go to church or a shrink. That's it. And it's like, why is this not part of the common dialogue? Oh, because it's considered religion or spirituality rather than just existence, rather than just being a conversation about existence and uncertainty. This has become something else entirely. And why? Well, largely because we're just so afraid that we just want to make sure that we're secure. So again, the discussion is very important. While we're saying that, we have about 5 minutes left of this episode. So I wanted to remind everybody, we have a roundtable coming up at 6 p.m. Eastern time in about 20 minutes. If you would like to join this roundtable, you can do so at patreon.com/dualistic unity. I'll throw a QR code here on the screen for this week's roundtable. If I can find the damn thing, I'm not going to worry about it right now. There it is. This is for this week's roundtable. Of course, if you don't see this QR code today, then it's probably not going to be helpful, but it will take you to Patreon regardless. Tier 2 and Tier 3 supporters can be on the roundtable, and this becomes an episode that people can listen to later, and it's an excellent opportunity to discuss whatever it is you're going through, how you challenge yourself, what you're learning from it, maybe how you've recognized that you beat yourself up, or possibly a project that you're working on, and that's how you're learning about yourself. We would like you to introduce yourself to the community because we learn from you as much as you might learn from us having this discussion. So there's the link. Do check it out. We would love to see you.
Yeah, especially when someone comes in, maybe they're new, maybe they're a little nervous to be there, and they say something anyway. That's one of my favorite times when that comes up, or when someone joins a roundtable, especially because those are a blast and they're podcast episodes. They are legitimate podcast episodes for a podcast that's what, top 5%, or is it
Indeed,
higher
we
than?
are top
Yeah.
5 or top 4 or 5%. Correct.
Yeah.
You are immortalized on a podcast episode, is what we're saying. Not that you're not already immortal in being everything that is, but you get to make a ripple, and it gets to be authentic because you're just going through your life.
Amen. And how funny it is, to your point, that those types of conversations, like when someone starts asking deeper questions, like they go to a fucking church, and like that's, you can't ponder shit in a church. You're actually pushed to not question things. So you got questions, they'll tell you they got answers, despite it being just as uncertain as any other answer that anyone could ever give you. And yet it's siloed, it's restricted to those types of things. Or, yeah, you start asking deep enough questions and people start thinking you're crazy. And then you get sent to a therapist or a shrink or psychotherapist, whatever you want to call them. And it's unreal how there's not a spot like to just dig in to things, because as much as, you know, we can talk, and it's super fun to talk about like the depths of reality and lack of division, like it's all informed by our experience. And so that's as much as, you know, the quote unquote deeper type things, our experience is as deep as any other conversation you could ever have. Like your day-to-day experience, your moment-to-moment experience is as deep as anything else you could experience. So even just discussing that, it's funny how much crossover, like we were talking about earlier, how much crossover there is in people's stories and the conversations, and how much more, you know, connected you can feel despite always going through it alone through your own perspective, but realizing like, oh, I'm not the only one with these crazy ass thoughts and ideas. I'm not the only one who suffers through this. And so, yeah, the roundtables, Patreon, they're fucking awesome space to just be able to be relaxed and push through your comfort zone a bit and just chat about like anything. Like we talk about anything anyone wants to bring up. Like, yeah, that's happening in reality. Let's chat about that a little bit more. Sounds pretty interesting, actually. I have some questions. So, yeah, hop in a round table if you haven't yet. And if you have, do it again.
Hell yeah. No, they're always a lot of fun for sure. And one last mention, of course, because it's coming up in less than 3 weeks. We have a retreat coming up in the Netherlands on November 11th. I am really excited for this. Just a lot of community members, some people who are new to the conversation, all coming to basically just process, be together in an environment that's judgment free, where they can eat some awesome food, walk around a sick property, hang out with us, shoot the shit, hang out in a wood fired hot tub, go for a jog in the morning, because I know Andrew tends to do that. So maybe he'll lead a parade one day. I tend to teach Wing Chun. We're also going to have a guitar player coming by. And it really is just an opportunity to hang out with the kind of people you want to hang out with, which are people who are just being themselves. They don't need anything from you because they don't want you to need anything from them. And so you have space to be yourself and practice all the lessons that you've been practicing this whole time amidst the world. and all of its influences. You actually get some space to realize how much you've already learned about yourself. And that's really all it's about. So check it out, dualistiCunity.com. There's some info in the events section. You can also find some sick discounts on our Patreon page. We're going to end this here, set up for the roundtable. I'm going to go smoke a joint, and we'll see everyone soon. Thank you for joining us.